It is January 24th, 2026. If you walk down Queen Street West in Toronto, or Robson Street in Vancouver, or even the main strip of any mid-sized town in Ontario today, you will notice something terrifying. It is the silence. The music has stopped. The for lease signs are multiplying like a virus in the windows of what used to be thriving family businesses. We are witnessing the death of Main Street Canada. While the government and the media have spent the last 2 years obsessing over housing prices and interest rates, they ignored the rotting foundation of the entire economy, the small business sector. The numbers released this morning are not just bad, they are a coroner's report. Over 15,000 Canadian businesses have formally filed for insolvency or closed their doors in the first 3 weeks of January alone. This is the January effect that no one wanted, but everyone should have seen coming. This is not a soft landing. This is a crash landing into a mountain of debt, taxes, and bureaucratic incompetence. We are looking at the systematic destruction of the private sector and the consequences for the housing market, for your job security, and for the social fabric of this country are going to be devastating. You cannot have a functioning housing market in an economy where no one can afford to employ anyone. The great hollow out of the Canadian economy has begun, and if you rely on a paycheck from the private sector to pay your mortgage, you are in the blast zone. Let's dissect the anatomy of this disaster. Why is this happening now? In January 2026, it is the perfect storm of deferred pain. For years, businesses were kept on life support. During the pandemic, the government handed out CEBA loans, the Canada Emergency Business Account. They told business owners to take the money, keep the staff on payroll, and survive until the recovery. Well, the deadline to repay those loans came and went, but the recovery never arrived. Instead, businesses were hit with a triple threat: historic inflation driving up the cost of goods, a labor shortage that drove up wages for unproductive work, and interest rates that made servicing debt impossible. For the last 12 months, thousands of zombie companies have been walking amongst us. They were technically insolvent, but they were burning through their last reserves of cash, hoping for a miracle. That miracle did not happen. The holiday season of 2025 was a bust. Consumer spending collapsed because, as we discussed in our previous video, the banks turned off the credit taps for homeowners. When homeowners stop spending, businesses stop earning. It is a vicious feedback loop. Now, in the cold light of January, the bills are due, the cash registers are empty, and the owners are throwing in the towel. But this isn't just about restaurants and retail stores. This is the dangerous misconception that the government wants you to believe. They want you to think this is just a few cafes closing down. It is not. We are seeing a massive spike in insolvencies in the construction sector, the transportation sector, and most alarmingly, the professional services sector. These are the white-collar jobs, the architects, the marketing agencies, the software development shops, the real estate brokerages. These are the businesses that employ the laptop class, the very people who bought million-dollar condos in Toronto and Vancouver. When a construction firm goes under, it doesn't just put 50 laborers out of work. It cancels contracts with suppliers, it stops paying the engineers, and it defaults on loans to the bank. The ripple effect is instant. We are tracking a surge in commercial lease defaults that is unprecedented. In downtown Calgary and Toronto, office vacancy rates are effectively masking a much deeper problem. Even the occupied spaces are being rented by companies that haven't paid rent in 3 months. The commercial real estate market is the next shoe to drop, and when it does, it will take the pension funds and the REITs down with it. The tragedy here is the human cost. These 15,000 businesses aren't just statistics. They represent generations of hard work. Take the example of a typical business owner. Let's call him David. David ran a logistics company in the Golden Horseshoe for 20 years. He survived the financial crisis of 2008. He survived the lockdowns, but he cannot survive this. His insurance premiums went up 40% this year. His property taxes on his warehouse went up 12%. The carbon tax increased his fuel cost to the point where every delivery was a loss. And then, the bank called his operating line of credit. Just like the HELOC freeze we warned you about, banks are pulling operating lines from small businesses aggressively. David didn't fail because he was bad at business. He failed because the environment in Canada has become hostile to enterprise. Yesterday, David laid off 40 employees. That is 40 families who now cannot pay their rent or their mortgage next month. Multiply that by 15,000 businesses. Do the math. The unemployment rate is about to skyrocket. The official numbers say unemployment is around 7%. That is a lie. If you count the people who have given up looking for work and the underemployed who are working 10 hours a week at a coffee shop because their engineering firm closed, the real unemployment rate is likely closer to double digits. We have to talk about the culprit. We have to talk about the policy decisions that led us here. The federal government, under Justin Trudeau, has spent the last decade expanding the public sector at the expense of the private sector. They have created an economy where the only safe job is a government job. They tax productivity to subsidize inefficiency. They increase the capital gains tax, sending a clear message to investors. Do not invest in Canada, and investors listened. Foreign direct investment in this country has collapsed. Why would anyone start a business here when the cost of living is exorbitant, the red tape is strangling, and the government takes half your profit? We are suffering from a productivity crisis that the Bank of Canada has been warning about in polite terms for years. Well, now the warning is over. The reality is here. Canadian workers are becoming less efficient and more expensive compared to our American counterparts. The brain drain is accelerating. The smartest young entrepreneurs are moving to Texas, to Florida, to anywhere but here. They are leaving behind an aging population and a shrinking tax base. Who is going to pay for the healthcare and the social services when the businesses that generate the tax revenue are gone? This economic collapse is directly tied to the housing market. There is a myth that housing can stay expensive even if the economy sucks. That is false. Housing prices are ultimately a function of local incomes. If the local economy is dying, if wages are stagnant or disappearing, housing prices must come down. It is a mathematical certainty. You cannot have a $2 million average home price in a city where the average household income is plummeting because the businesses are closing. We are entering a phase of stagflationary depression. Prices for essentials like food and energy will stay high because of taxes and currency devaluation, but asset prices like homes and stocks will fall because of the liquidity crunch. It is the worst of both worlds. The wealth effect is working in reverse, as business owners liquidate their assets to pay off debts. We are seeing a flood of luxury cottages, investment condos, and recreational vehicles hitting the market. This increases supply. At the same time, the laid-off workers are dropping out of the buyer pool, decreasing demand. This is how you get a 40 or 50% correction in real estate. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly as the insolvency filings work their way through the court system and then all at once. The banking sector is also heavily exposed to this commercial collapse. We talk a lot about residential mortgages, but the Canadian banks have billions tied up in commercial loans to these failing businesses. When a business goes bankrupt, the recovery rate for the bank is often pennies on the dollar. This erodes the bank's capital buffers. To protect themselves, the banks will tighten lending standards even further, not just for businesses, but for everyone. This is the credit crunch. It means that even if you have a job, even if you want to buy a house, the bank might say no because they are too busy putting out fires in their commercial loan book. The system is interconnected. You cannot isolate the failure of Main Street from the failure of Bay Street. So, what does the next 6 months look like for the Canadian economy? It looks like a purge. We are going to see the financialization of the economy unwind. For too long, we thought we could get rich by selling houses to each other and serving coffee to the real estate agents. That era is over. We are about to find out what our economy is actually worth without the steroid injection of cheap debt, and the answer is terrifying. We expect the unemployment rate to breach 8.5% by the summer of 2026. We expect consumer bankruptcies to surpass the records set in 2009. We expect a massive political backlash as people realize that the social safety net they were promised is full of holes. The government will try to print money to fix it. They will announce new stimulus packages, new job creation programs, but it will be too little, too late. You cannot print productivity. You cannot print a thriving small business sector. Once a business closes, it is very hard to bring it back. The capital is destroyed. The relationships are broken. For you, the viewer, this means you need to adopt a wartime mentality regarding your finances. If you work for a small to medium-sized business, you need to understand that your job is not safe. I don't care how long you have been there. I don't care how much the boss likes you. If the line of credit gets cut, the payroll stops. You need to have an emergency fund that is not dependent on credit. You need to diversify your income streams if possible. Do not make major purchase decisions based on your current income, because that income could vanish tomorrow. If you are a business owner, you need to cut costs ruthlessly. Cash is oxygen. Do not hope for a bailout. Look at your balance sheet and ask yourself, can I survive if revenue drops 30% for the next 2 years? If the answer is no, you need to restructure now before the bank does it for you. We are witnessing the end of the Canadian dream as we knew it. The promise that if you work hard and start a business, you will get ahead. That promise has been broken. The system has been rigged to favor the rent seekers, the monopolies, and the government bureaucrats, while punishing the risk takers and the builders. But the market always wins in the end. The market is clearing out the rot. It is painful, it is brutal, but it is necessary. The fake economy is dying so that a real economy might one day be born from the ashes. But that day is a long way off. For now, we are in the descent. The for lease signs on Main Street are not just empty spaces. They are tombstones for the Canadian economy of the last decade. They are a warning. If you are ignoring this, if you are still bidding over asking on a house, if you are still leveraging yourself to the hilt, you are walking blindfolded into a minefield. The explosion has already started. You just haven't felt the shockwave yet, but it is coming. Stay liquid, stay alert, and most importantly, stay skeptical of the official narrative. They told you inflation was transitory. They told you rates would stay low. Now they are telling you the economy is strong. Look out the window. Look at the empty storefronts. Believe your eyes, not their lies. Subscribe to Canada Property Watch. We will keep tracking the collapse of the real economy, sector by sector. We are the only ones telling you the ugly truth that the mainstream media is too afraid to broadcast. Prepare for the unemployment shock. It is here.